and this is A Coach for the Coach, connecting the dots. Well, welcome everybody to your normal Sunday viewing, A Coach for the Coach. I am your coach, Helen Williams, and we've got a great show for you today. The team that I want to shout out, though, like I normally do, is Cheney University. Coach Tammy A. Bagby doing some really good things there. So we want to give her her props and wish her well this season. If you want to get in touch with me, follow me on social media, HMW Sports for YouTube and also for Twitter. Follow me at A Coach for the Coach on Instagram, and then also A Coach for the Coach, my Facebook page as well. So I am excited about tonight's guest. I've known him for a long time and just really have enjoyed our friendship and his mentorship when I was coaching. And I think he has a lot of really good things to teach our young coaches today, especially. So I'm going to bring him on, Coach Richard Barron, head coach for the University of Maine men's basketball team. What's up, Coach?
Hey, good to see you, Helen.
How you doing?
Good. Now, is that smile because you're seeing me, or is that a residual from last night? You know,
I'm gonna be honest. It's a little bit of both.
Good.
I'm gonna be honest. It's a little bit of both. It's been a very trying few years, and I was excited about the results, nonetheless, just like a lot of people yesterday. So yeah, it's probably a little bit of both.
Well, we had some exchanges. I'm certainly I'm happy for all of you that get to see some representation that you've never seen before. So
yeah. It's important, and it's one of the things that I appreciate about our friendship is your understanding of that, and your just how you pay attention to those things like that. So I want to let you know I appreciate you for that.
Thank you.
Yeah. So we're going to talk about coaching, something we both love. I am not coaching anymore, obviously, but I'm coaching coaches. And one of the things about this show that I want to teach coaches is that, normally with coaching, they give you a whistle and they say, welcome to the profession. But you do need to actually prepare and work to get better, just like you expect your players to do. And obviously, you've been a head coach and an assistant. Most of your career, you've been a head coach. But I want to talk about first what your philosophy is in coaching and sort of how you came to that, because we'll talk about it later, but you've been to a lot of different types of schools and worked for different people.
Yeah. So, I mean, the first thing that kind of comes to mind is that coaching is, it's mentorship. It's very similar to parenting in some ways. It's growing, right? It's, we talk all the time about you either getting better, you're getting worse, right? You're either growing or you're dying. And I think that's true, in so many things in life. And coaching is trying to make sure that you're growing. And so I do think that we have a platform or a subject media of athletics, but one of the things we talked about a lot while we were there at Princeton together was how athletics was co-curricular. Right? It wasn't co-curricular. It wasn't in addition to the classes or just a hobby. It was part of their education. And so we really value and still do, I think both of us, how much character we can build through athletics. So I think that's the first thing I would say about, coaching in general. And then I think in terms of philosophies, I've constantly been growing and evolving, not always drastically, but, over the years, I think I have a completely different perspective now at soon to be 52 than what I had when I started coaching when I was 22. So those 30 years have changed me. And one of the things that just stands out to me, and did another interview earlier this week, and it really kind of resonated when I was thinking about it. Responding to a similar question, was how fortunate I've been to have such good people around me, good players, good assistant coaches, good administrators, working at strong institutions, because they allowed me to grow, right? They allowed me to make mistakes. They allowed me to, I don't want to say get away with things, because that's not the intent. It wasn't trying to get away with things, but just to be able to be a little bit naive, or, to grow and learn there's no way I would coach today the same way that I coached, even 15 years ago when we were together at Princeton. So I think that's the same thing that we would expect from our athletes to continue to grow.
Mhm.
And the same way we talk about a player like Michael Jordan changed his game as he got older, but he was still great. I think that we all do that as coaches too.
So what are some of the things that you focus on in terms of being able to evolve? Because we all need to do that as people in general, but are there some specific things that you look to for your evolution?
Well, I think it's a combination of two things. One is I think you've always got to serve the institution and the team. So who are you coaching? Where are you coaching? What's required to do the job? Not making it about you, but who are you serving? And so that may require you to change, right? That may require you to bring a different approach. Obviously, recruiting at Princeton was very different than recruiting at Baylor, but there was some overlap. I mean,
Mhm.
when I first went to Baylor, Shanae Agumake was one of the people we were really targeting and recruiting. Spent a lot of time in her living room. It was NECA at the time. NECA was the oldest, and so but that was also someone we would have targeted at Princeton very much. We would have loved to have had her at Princeton too. So it wasn't that there wasn't overlap. It's just the process was very different. And so, learning your institution and how to do that job. It isn't really just about you and kind of what you want to do. It's really about how you serve the institution, serve the team, serve the needs of the players. That can be true with X's and O's and stuff too. So I always think that it's a whole lot easier for me to change, right? Not that it's easy, but it's just easier than it is for me to change 18 to 25 other people, especially if they're, many of them are 17 to 22 years old, right?
Right.
So I've adjusted to, trying to figure out how I can have a different approach. I just feel a lot more in control too when I do that. So I feel like it's really important, that I spend that time really focusing on what I'm doing. So that's the first thing. I think the second thing is always just asking yourself, am I doing a good job? Are we getting better or worse? What could I do better? A real sense of accountability that, while we're trying to serve, the team, the organization, the school, and we're thinking about their needs, we're putting it on our shoulders. So we're accepting responsibility for the outcome. And that's really important too. We can't just blame everybody else. We can't say, well, if I only had, a 7-foot center, if I only had a player like the all conference, kid who plays at Vermont or whatever it is, right? You've got to find a way to be successful despite everything else. And so I spend a lot of time kind of in my head, talking to myself, just asking that question, how am I doing? What, if I could do that again, would I do it the same way? Is that, how do I feel like this relationship is going? Do I know that, or am I feeling that? Have I asked that question? Do I really know the answer? So I think it's a lot of it's just kind of questioning yourself.
Yeah, I don't think we as coaches are self-reflective or self-aware enough. I think we need to spend more time with that and be more intentional in terms of what you just talked about with the players as well. Is this relationship going the way that it should? Should I make changes so that I can help this player get the best out of himself or herself?
Well, especially today. I mean, the way this generation learns and communicates, the amount of time they spend on screens, whether it's their phone or computer, the way they, you might be able to have a really in-depth, personal connecting sort of conversation with them through a text message, where for me, that would seem impersonal. For them, it's more comfortable. An in-person meeting might be threatening and awkward. They may feel like they're being judged in a way or something, getting called into the office type of thing.
Yeah.
And for them, that's not how they would talk to their friends. They wouldn't say, we have to see each other. They would just start texting, right? Or they would, whatever, direct
FaceTime or something like that. Yeah.
Whatever they're doing, it would be through a screen probably, right? So I think for us to, again, instead of trying to make everybody adjust to the way I would communicate or what I think is best, it's a lot easier for me to be a little bit malleable and just always say, the goal is to get better, so if my stubbornness, my rules or my deliberateness is helping us get better, then that's a good thing. If that discipline teaches in a way that helps us, that's great. If it's not, then I need to adjust.
Have you had any issues just sort of adjusting to the technology piece in terms of communication? I know that's one of the things that I found very difficult was I just didn't feel like there was a connection unless I brought a kid into the office. Now, I would make sure that I didn't sit behind my desk because I didn't want to be like it was the principal's office. I would purposely sit next to them or away from that sort of scenario to help them feel comfortable. But I found that really difficult to adjust to the technology piece of it.
I think the thing that's been difficult, really, it hasn't so much been the adjustment to technology. It's more of the impact, and that, we have, let's say it's 4 hours of time with these players a day, 5-6 days a week, right? At the most, right? So, then occasionally you've got some time on the road. Maybe this year, obviously, is going to be very different, but.
Right.
But so for the most part, we have 20 hours of countable athletic activity a week, and we might have a few more hours just around that, whether it's talking to someone in the training room or visiting with them after or before practice, that kind of thing. So, but everybody else has access to them the other 20 hours a day. So whether it's Twitter, messaging, Facebook, chat rooms, the media, everybody can get to the kids. And so that's, I think, the biggest adjustment is that you've got to be so good in your 4 hours to combat everything that's going to happen in the other 20. And it's not that everything in the other 20 is always going to be bad or always going to have some sort of bad intentions. It's just that a lot of people that are going to be throwing that stuff out there don't understand team. They don't even know what's going on in practice. They don't know,
Right.
Even parents who love their kids more than anything in the world tend not to, know everything that's going on in a practice, right? They don't know that the player's not working as hard as they can, or that they were 15 minutes late, or, any of the other stuff. They don't get all that information. So I think that's probably the hardest thing, the biggest adjustment that's happened is just how bombarded kids are, with information, with opinions. And so how that affects not only their performance on the court, but how that also impacts their performance in the classroom, their responsibilities there. Even the impact of social media on, I know this is kind of maybe a few years ago sort of lesson, but the impact of what you put out there and how it lasts forever, right? There's a digital copy of it now that's out there forever. So whether it's, off-color remarks or a joke or even retweeting lyrics, we've all seen kids who've done that, and it can have a really big impact. It's something that they don't understand the consequences for. So that these things are really, really powerful devices, right?
Yeah.
And I don't know that our young players fully understand, the implications, and they shouldn't. They're still, 18 to 22. They're becoming adults. They're not adults yet. And so, I think sometimes the consequences are a little extreme relative to the age and their understanding of responsibility, but that just makes our job to teach them that all the more important.
Yeah. So during those 4 hours, are you intentional about combating those other 20? Like, how do you do that?
I am. You're probably going to say, yeah, you are. I am the king of analogies, right? So
yes, you are.
I'm constantly trying to connect with them by making some sort of analogy, some sort of parallel to something they may identify in their life, so they can connect the dots, right? But I do believe that we're always teaching life lessons, and I'm far more intentional about building our culture now than ever before. I think I was always kind of at schools where there was strong culture. We recruited kids of high character. But I'm a little more deliberate now than ever before, probably because of that, that it's something we have to constantly be communicating. And one of our quotes in practice this week was from Confucius that said, I'll paraphrase it here. I hear and I forget, I see and I remember, I do and I understand. And so, trying to help them through those steps and just understand saying it once isn't enough. Being able to, I told you that in practice is not good enough as a coach.
Mm. Yeah. Well, and that the culture word is something that's thrown around all the time. And I think, how do you develop that? I know young coaches they hear that, or a young head coach or something. Like how would you give advice in terms of how to build a culture?
Well, I think first you have to know what it is you want, right? What you have to define it. So what does that culture look like, right? Well, I think that's critical to all of this. So I think there's both the culture of what you want your team to look like on the court, and also what you want your team to look like off the court. Because sometimes you can have one that's really good and the other isn't. And I think they're both important. So
should they be the same?
Well, in some ways, yes. I think, like integrity, right? Integrity on the court, the way we play the game, the integrity off the court, the way we handle our academics. I mean, those things may be true for both, and integrity is a big thing for me, right? So I would hope that that's part of our team's culture. But it's not just it's not just writing the words down. Culture has to be defined, and then it has to be acted out. So we have to describe it, we have to show it, we have to praise it, right? And I think that our guys really are starting to understand that, how we've done a good job over the last 2 years really defining our culture off the court. We really, school best in terms of team GPA and all that kind of thing. Kids are doing really well, very involved in social organizations around campus and leadership and stuff like that, really making a very positive impact on our community, a lot of community service. So they've done a marvelous job of kind of buying in there. But I think the where we need to do better is our buy-in in terms of team play, in terms of culture, how we play, what we are always going to do, what are our non-negotiables, right? If somebody tried to say if the charge was that the University of Maine men's basketball team was a team that played together and played hard and played selfishly, would somebody have enough evidence to convict us, right? If whether it's pulling up game tape or practice tape, would they be able to prove it if that was the charge? So it really is about an action. It isn't about a slogan on a T-shirt. It isn't about words on the wall. It isn't about a pamphlet that you hand out at the beginning of the season. It isn't about team rules that you sign and then put away in a drawer. Yeah. It's about your actions every day. Who are we? What do we bring? What do we accept every day? And just because something doesn't necessarily conform with the culture, there may be some sort of judgment and discussion to bring back, but there still has to be an element of grace. There still has to be enough room to make mistakes and still feel like, you don't want people walking around on eggshells either. Right. So, and I think, more and more, I'm trying to get our players to help define that culture and trust that they're good kids and they're going to come up with it, instead of just telling them what it should be, as a coach. I don't want this just to be Richard Barron's 10 principles, and then I've got to go find, players who are going to at least tacitly agree with them, to get through 4 years of playing it, at Maine. So I really want it to be about them and what do they want it to look like, and then I'm there to help them get there.
Yeah. So there's better buy-in when they're part of the process.
Absolutely. Now it's harder to do it because it isn't necessarily instinctive for them, or they don't always get what you mean. You've got to try a few times, you got to keep trying. So I don't want to say that it's easy, but it is a whole lot easier just to say, okay, this is what our culture is going to be, and write, 1 through 5, and, get a poster slapped on the wall or get some T-shirts made up. But that ain't going to take. That ain't going to mean much.
How do you balance that with the responsibility and really the pressure and the stress to be successful too? Because we all know that, I mean, that's part of the deal, is to have, a successful program. And we tell our kids, listen, you need to be patient. You'll get your playing time. You need to, you need to grow here. You need to grow there. But in reality, we'd like for that to happen, but we're not as patient as head coaches because we want some results. So it's kind of you can't have it both ways. But how do you reconcile that?
Well, I think you just said it. You can't have it both ways. You've got to pick which kind of coach you're going to be. And there are some who are probably, kind of, I don't know, a little more totalitarian. It's this way or the highway. You're either producing or you're gone. There's not a whole lot of nurturing necessarily that goes on in those organizations, but it's really just it's transactional, right? It's what do you bring to the table? You bring this level of athleticism. I'm gonna run certain plays and sets to put you in a situation. You're either going to produce or you're not. You're either getting better or you're getting out, and it's pretty straightforward. And some people thrive in that sort of very clearly defined expectation. And obviously a lot of people don't, right? And so you might have a program where there's high turnover, and that may lead to winning. And I'm not disputing that, but I don't know that it's who I am, and I think I'm not sure that it's part of the education process that I believe in, right? And so I think there's a better way to win, and that's together and teaching fundamentals and teaching. Buy-in, discipline, and so but I can't be both, right? If I look like a hypocrite to my players, right? If I constantly am going back and forth with them, I think you lose credibility. And so, what my dad said to me when I was young, starting coaching, he said, you can be the kind of coach who, people are going to run through a wall for you because they love you so much, or you can be the kind of coach that they're going to just try to prove you wrong because they think you're an SOB. But you can't be both. You got to pick one. Right? You can't. Yeah. And I'm sure that almost all sort of leadership positions, that's probably true to some extent, right? There has to be a certain authenticity, but there also has to be a certain consistency. Right?
Yeah.
For everybody else to know how to work around it.
So part of building culture is hiring your staff.
Yep.
And when you're looking for staff, just for our young coaches, what kinds of things do you look for? And can you tell our younger coaches who want to be a head coach what types of things they should be doing to put themselves in a position to reach their goal? Right.
Well, I think, on the outside, most people look at things in a very simple sort of, someone was a third assistant, then they become a second assistant. This sort of linear progression,
right?
And that's not real life. That leads to a lot of bad hires, and just because someone's good in sales doesn't mean they're a good manager, right? So sometimes you can promote someone out of a position that they're really good at, into a position they're not really good at. And at the same time, then there are other people who, like you take someone like an Eric Spolestra, who gets in at the ground level and just proves his worth in every position, right? So I think regardless, I think wherever you are, you want to make yourself indispensable, right? That you're doing such a good job that the organization couldn't lose you. Right? That's number one. But in terms of filling positions, I look for what does the team need? What do I need? What are we trying to accomplish? So it's not necessarily what everybody else would look at. I may have a real strong sense of where we're going to be going with recruiting over the next few years, or feel even like that might be my strong suit, and I need someone who's going to help do something different, right? Versus other people might look at a hiring position, like, well, that has to be a recruiting coordinator, right? We put a lot of titles on it. Because of that, because I believe, and you probably remember this very well, I would guess, that we share all the duties on my staff. So we don't, I want my assistants to, one, be engaged. I can't ask for their counsel if they have no level of experience, right? Everybody does scouts. Everybody does, recruits. Everybody is involved in position work or practice planning. We want it to be collaborative in what we do. So in order to value their opinion, I have to give them experiences that make their opinion valuable. And so others do it very differently, right? Some people are very territorial in terms of their work. And everybody kind of gets into their silo and works alone, and that may be a good way to do it. It's just not for me, because I want a more team approach. So then I think also, trying as best I can to ask enough good questions to know, is someone a good fit? You're not always going to get it right, and it's not always fair to try to make judgments, right, on whether somebody might be a good fit. But to ask enough questions about, how people have gotten to where they are, how they make decisions, what do they value, how they see things going, right? What would they like out of this position? What would they like out of this career? And so that's always been, kind of how I made the decision. It's a little bit. I like to really kind of have an idea of who it is and what I want, and that. And when I really targeted you, So,
yeah, you recruited me. I didn't even know I was being recruited.
Right. But it's actually before I was recruiting you, I guess I was interviewing you, and you didn't know you were being interviewed, right? So
yeah, true.
But that's that's true. I mean, it's just relationships. It's just getting to know people, and to be able to do that with you without you knowing that a job was maybe at stake, right? Changed the way we talked. Right. There was a much more comfortable and honest conversation when we were just getting to know each other. And then I brought up the job, not the job first, right? Which would have put up some walls, and, we would have both been posturing a little bit. Right. So I've tried to do that, in my hires, and in my current staff. One of the things that was really important was buy-in to Maine and belief in Maine. I felt like it was really important that we had a staff that loved the university and loved the opportunity. And so all three of my assistant coaches had either been at Maine, played at Maine, or worked at Maine, before. So Igor Vizina was a prep school coach at Lee Academy, and several of his players were on the team at Maine at the time. Really good program, prep school program in the NEPSAC up there in Lee, Maine. Not too far, a little bit north of here near Lincoln. Ednisha Curry, who's now not the only woman on men's staff anymore, thank goodness. Loyola has joined the club with Tiny Adams, but Eddie had been on my staff on the women's side, so she knew the university and knew me, so she knew what she was getting into, and Kevin Reed, who was a great player at Maine and was a local high school coach at the time, but somebody who I thought was a great example of what our players should want to be. He was a terrific player. He's had a professional career overseas, primarily in Belgium. Came back and married 3 kids. Great father, great husband. Just a really wholesome sort of image of what you can be if you go play basketball at Maine. He went to St. Thomas Aquinas, another NEPSAC school, so he came from a strong basketball background as well. So I think that meant a lot to me, was having people who I didn't have to worry about their happiness or their being further away or geographically isolated or whatever it was. I knew that they wanted to be here.
So it's a great segue into something very interesting about you, in the fact that you have coached both men and women in college, literally from the beginning. And so what are some unique experiences that you have? Everybody's always saying, "Oh, is it different coaching women or men?" And I don't want to go that direction. I want to talk about the unique experiences that you have, coaching each gender.
Well, I mean, the real benefit to, I very accidentally stumbled into coaching women's basketball. It wasn't by design. It wasn't a plan. It was kind of a spur of the moment decision to take the women's job at the school I was at. I was actually planning on leaving as an interim because the women's coach had just resigned. And so I learned so much from that experience. It was my first head job. And so but as I have gotten older and I've had more experiences, I realized how much value being around women's athletics has, and the life lessons I learned, and the maturity that I was able to gain by working with women, the level of people that I worked with, the staff, including you, Helen. I just always was around quality people and great programs, and I so appreciated women's athletics, especially the athletes that we got to coach, and their hunger for getting better, and their hard work and their commitment. And so, I think when I think about it, it's not just any one experience, but being able to, learn what I was able to learn that I probably never would have. Right? So I was blessed. I was very fortunate that I got to coach women.
Give us an example of what you learned when you were coaching women.
Well, I mean, communication and empathy. I think just the toughness that women have. That there's a different way to do things. I don't know if you remember the Kathy DeBoer book about the differences between men and women in athletics. And
yes.
And
I don't know the title, but I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, it's a great book. Kathy DeBoer was the Olympic level volleyball player and coach and at University of Kentucky, and got into athletic administration, I believe, with Sam Newton there. And she may have been there at the same time that Bernadette Maddox was coaching with Rick Pitino in Kentucky, if I'm remembering right. But she had some great insight into, some of the differences between men and women, and these are generalizations, so they certainly aren't things that you can just apply across the board and say that everything is true. But I think that there's a lot of truth to what she had said, and there were some things that she talked about that made me uncomfortable because I felt like someone might be describing me, right? And how she talked about when one example was a coach that they had. And she said something that stuck out, like he wore cologne to practice or something. I don't know if you remember that from the book, but it was the way he saw girls that he was coaching, or the young women that he was coaching, was very different than they wanted to be treated. That they were there for volleyball, and and I don't mean that it was it was necessarily sexual. I don't think that was her point, but it was just that there was some sort of masculinity that he was basically performing, right? Acting, mm-hmm. Right? And that was how he was going to get their respect. And she said, no, that's not it at all. We want to learn volleyball. We want, or if it could have been basketball, she was also a basketball player. But specific stories, I think some of the conversations I've had with players, where they've shared with me or been honest enough in their conversation that they've let me into how I feel and how I think. It's an eye opener, and those experiences have made me so much better at understanding other people. Now, I mess up at it. I'm not always good at it. And sometimes I stick my foot in my mouth and say the wrong thing, but I used to catch myself a little bit quicker now, right? I stop mid-sentence or apologize the next day or whatever it is.
Yeah. So I'm going to preface this with a story about when I was working for you, working with you. You used to you had baby twins,
Yeah.
and at Princeton. And after every game, you would bring one of the twins into the postseason and into the post game meeting. And I always wondered first why you did that. I know family is important to you, but what were you trying to teach your players and your coaching staff? And now that your kids are older and they've had an opportunity to be around the women's teams and the men's teams, what is that teaching them?
Yeah. So the twins, I'm extremely competitive, right? And so, I get heated. I get into the game. I expect to win. I whether it's being upset about a call or poor execution or whatever it is, those things I can overreact to something like that. It's not that big a deal in life really, but to a coach in that moment, it seems like a huge deal. And I always just knew that if I was holding one of my little girls, that I was going to feel differently, right? There's just a calmness that comes over you, and I wasn't going to go in, and it reminded me that even though they were, 18 to 22-year-old young women, they were somebody's little girl. And so, how do I talk to them? How do I talk about their performance, their game, whether we won or lost or whatever. So that was part of it. It just kind of, I don't know, centered me in a way. Right?
Okay.
But my kids growing up around, some really neat people. And it's funny, we were just in Hawaii this year with our team right after Christmas. And Elisa Maeda came to the game with her little children and sat at the game with my kids that she used to babysit. And so, just to think how, the girls turned 17 in a couple of weeks.
Wow.
Hard to believe, right? But that to see it was almost like 3 generations kind of thing, at least than the kids than her kids. So that was great fun to to be able to see her and see that connection. So all my kids have grown up with some great role models and a very healthy respect for both women's and men's sports. I think they've enjoyed this transition back to the men's side. For me, they've enjoyed having the guys around too, which is great. And so I think we always have the team over for dinner and stuff like that, and they all have their favorites. They all kind of have those connections with certain players and really enjoy having them over. And they've always liked the women too. It wasn't like one was better than the other sort of thing. It's just they've just had some great role models in their life for my kids. Every time and that's true not just here in this sort of setting at our house, but also whether it's coming to practice or in the summers, being able to have people, come over and do summer sort of Maine activities, whether it's go out on the boat or tubing or fishing or things like that. And they really enjoy that as well. And they know that they're part of our family. So they treat them as such. They look forward to seeing them.
Do you think they pick up different lessons from the different genders?
Yeah, and I don't know about from the different genders. That probably have to ask them that question. But they definitely pick up lessons, and they also learn. We include them not in every conversation, but they, Mo and I talk. She was a coach, so she certainly understands the job and wants to know how things are going. And so, just like any couple talking about work at the end of the day, I might share with her what's going on, and our kids are learning from both the good and bad things that
Yeah.
players are doing, making the mistakes they might make, or I hope that that's something that it's kind of rubbing off on them. I think it is. I'm very proud of my kids. They do They do a great job in school. They're very respectful. They're disciplined athletes. They're as good athletes as they got their DNA from their mom, and you know, as aspiring an athlete as they got their DNA from their dad.
So I want to finish on this one point. Obviously, we've had a historic election, and going to have the first woman vice president. And I'm curious as to how, what's the best way to say this? How you will use that to teach leadership to your son and to your men's basketball program, because we obviously see the benefit of the young women seeing her in that position, but there's also, I think, benefits in terms of learning leadership for your son and for your players.
Yeah, well, I think for Billy, my son, and for my players, they already have some very strong women leaders in their lives, and Mo is a great mom and a great leader and great example, that he's always had in his life. And Eddie is a woman of color and a woman who is very strong and confident and assertive, that Billy has known now for 5 years, right? So, and then our players have known this is the third year that she's coached them. I think that's probably even stronger just because it's so present. You know what I mean? It's they're on a daily basis. It's not something on TV right now, and then we kind of go back to our lives. So I think, if anything, it is a validation of their belief that this is something that should have happened a long time ago. I think most of our guys have expressed that and are extremely supportive. I think Eddie was tweeting out yesterday that one of the strongest feelings of pride was some of her guys sending her text. She calls our players her guys, right? So she says some of my guys are sending me text messages, about how meaningful this must be for me. And so they get it. They know it. They know that struggle. So I think also, everything that's happened this year, not just with the election, right, but with George Floyd and Breonna Taylor and everybody else, all the social unrest has led to some very, deep discussions, not just within our team, but for everybody, right? We've had some of those discussions ourselves. And so I think our guys have had, Eddie in that place all along too. And so again, this has been a chance for them to kind of see some normalcy in a way to what we were doing that was a little bit different, So I think that's been a very positive thing. I do think, that it's important for all of us to know that not everybody voted for Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. And there are a lot of people, there were 80 million people that did. There were 70 plus million who didn't. That doesn't mean 70 plus million people didn't want a woman vice president. And I think we have to be careful about making that sort of binary assumption that, that that's the case. I hope, and I'm kind of this eternal optimist, Ellen. I hope that at least 75, 80% of our entire population at least feels good about seeing a Black woman vice president for the first time. I really do believe that. I do know that there's some people who probably aren't very happy about it, and some people who are probably even angry about it. I just think they are very much in the minority. I think most people, regardless of their politics, believe and now understand the value that women bring. And that doesn't mean we don't have more work to do. We have a lot more work to do. But this is a victory we can all celebrate, regardless of who you voted for, regardless of your political affiliation, your region, the country, your gender. This is a chance for all of us to celebrate, because we're all going to be better having a more diverse group of leaders, or a bigger, deeper pool to pull candidates from, different experiences. The same way my life has been, made so much better by getting to coach women. I think we're going to see that many times over for our country moving forward.
Yeah. Well, that's one of the great things about sports is you can talk about those things and get a visceral understanding and what diversity is and the positive things about it. So, hey, listen, I appreciate your time today. I mean, you just gave us so many great nuggets, and I can't wait to watch this over again so I can really dig deep into some of the things that you said. But it's been great for the younger coaches, and I really appreciate your time today.
Well, absolutely. And if my staff or I can ever do anything to help any of your clients or anybody who's just listening, we're more than happy to do it. And for anybody out there who is thinking about working with you, Helen, I would strongly recommend they do it. I think you're a terrific person, so smart, so thoughtful, right? And I know that you're helping a lot of young coaches get off their careers in the right direction right now. So keep it up. Keep going.
All right. I appreciate it, Richard. Thank you.
Got it.
All right. So there you have it. Really good conversation. If you watch this live, I encourage you to go back and watch it again. I think Richard gave us some really good nuggets. And so thank you for joining us this Sunday, and I look forward to seeing you next week as well.